I saw an ad in there that said, get paid to play games. Oh, that sounds like my kind of gig. Got to work on the first expansion pack to the very first Call of Duty. I actually got to showcase it at E3 that. And going to E3 and showing off your level for the press and the public, I'd never experienced anything like that. And I was hooked for life. I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. They've always been this giant, colossal franchise with all this momentum, all this power, all this financial weight. And the truth is, they all started off unknown. Start off with knowing who you're targeting. Build that core offering, test and learn, iterate through it, work with the audience, find the fun. Imagine all of my friends are playing a certain online multiplayer game. I'm going to go play that with them. Even if I don't particularly like that game, I like my friends. I like to call, ironically, friendship hostage. When the power of a team comes together and each person owns the vision in their own head and they're combining them in a new and unique way, man, this is when you get magic. First time you make anything, it kind of sucks. Almost always.
I am thrilled to be joined by Thaddeus Sasser, whose career has shaped some of the most played shooters in the world. From Battlefield to PUBG to Rivals, few people had a front row seat to the challenges and breakthrough that building a great game of that kind of scale. In this conversation, we're going to dive into what it takes to deliver shooters at scale, how to balance innovation with player expectations, what true leadership looks like inside a AAA team, and of course, the next chapter for the genre. But rather than me trying to sum this career up impactfully, I'd rather hand the mic over to Thad and let Thad tell his story himself. Thad, man, how are you?
Hey, it's great to see you again. It's been a while since we talked. We've done a little bit of conversation before, and I'm always happy to get back on your podcast and chat with you. I always have a good time, and hopefully the audience really enjoys it as well.
Yeah, you reached out to me and you wanted to be on another podcast, and we kind of went back and forth, and there were so many cool stories we could talk about. You worked on so many different topics that I decided to kind of throw the question out to my audience as well and get a better understanding what they wanted to listen to, which if I keep that front part, everyone was going to hear that, right? But let's talk about kind of you. Can you kind of give us your background on how you got into the gaming industry and what it was like when you started to where you are today?
Well, it was very different back when I started. As you can imagine, there weren't many degree programs for game design, and there weren't that many known avenues to get into game design. In fact, I didn't even know I could be a game designer. I'd never imagined this as a career for myself, and I got really fortunate. I was in Los Angeles at the time, and I'd started my own IT company, and I hated my boss myself. I was terrible, and I thought, okay, I need to go find a job where somebody else is going to employ me because I'm not having fun doing this. So I looked in the paper. I know jobs used to be found in the newspaper. It's an archaic thing. There's no such thing anymore. But there used to be a physical newspaper you'd get, and it had jobs in it. And I saw an ad in there that said, "Get paid to play games." Oh, that sounds like my kind of gig. And of course, it's a QA position, which means you get paid to play the same broken game over and over and over, and then you write about how broken it is. And luckily, I was actually really good at this. Not only was I good at analyzing the bugs and understanding the bugs and writing them up, but I'm also, having been a lifelong gamer and avid consumer of games, I was really good at games as well. And ironically enough, that's one of the requirements in QA for you to kind of excel and, move up the scale and so on. So over a few years, I went through some interesting challenges and journeys and learned a lot, and eventually worked my way up to the point where I got embedded in a game development studio. And that game development studio, it was really fortuitous. It was Gray Matter Interactive in Los Angeles. And I got to work with an amazing team of just absolutely stellar game developers on a game called Return to Castle Wolfenstein. I have the backpack for it right up here, actually. And this was kind of my first foray into being an embedded tester, of looking at the scripting and the code and the level design and offering my input directly to the developers on a daily basis. And while I was there, I also got a chance to showcase some of the things I did in my spare time. I loved games already. I was already taking apart files and editing them just because that's the kind of guy I am. And so I was able to show off some of my mods and so on. And they said, "Hey, do you want a job?" I said, "Oh, really?" "Yes, of course." And so I became a game designer then. And it turned out to be a really good career move. We shipped Return to Castle Wolfenstein. It was a fun, really great fun game. Then we went to work on a new title, a new shooter, which unfortunately got canceled partway through. You see, this is a common theme throughout my game development career. But then I got really lucky. I got to work on the first expansion pack to the very first Call of Duty. And the first level that I made was a B-17 bomber mission where you flew over Europe in a RAF, Lend-Lease B-17 bomber. And I scripted the gameplay with the airplanes flying and the physics and the turrets and all this stuff. And it was received well enough by the team and by the testers and so on that I actually got to showcase it at E3 that year. And going to E3 and showing off your level for the press and the public, I'd never experienced anything like that. And I was hooked for life. I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. So that's kind of how I got my start. I don't think it's very common for people to move up through the ranks of QA and get jobs, but every time I can, when I find somebody who's really promising who works inside of QA, I love to help them climb the ranks and become designers as well. Because a lot of times the QA people are there because they have that passion and they have that perseverance and that grit to push through all the hardships that are going to be required when you're an actual game developer. So I think I personally love that path because you get an insight into how game development works. You understand how bugs are made, how bugs are fixed, how to communicate with your team, and so on. And so for me, it's a really great path for developers. But I think there are many other paths that are probably more common, more frequent these days.
It's funny to hear you talk through a QA like that because I liken that same thing to community management these
Mm,
days. But community management was not really a thing back then as much as it is today. Today, it's the community managers that are hearing the game is broken or this is happening or this is happening, right?
yeah,
And you're hearing all different sides, and that is your front lines, and you're learning from it. And you did that same thing for gray matter, right? Right? And you were able to learn that information there. And when you're exposed to it, you can truly find what you love to do, right? Some people will love game design, some people will love art, some people will love sound, and which path do you want to lead down? But it's that exposure to everything that can really help you learn which path I want to go.
I love that perspective, Greg. And I will say, I also had no idea that things like my love of World War II airplanes would lead to me creating a level for Call of Duty, right? This is something from my childhood that I was passionate about. So I would say always be learning, always be taking in everything you can because you never know what's going to help you. Right, you may be like, I'll never need math, and then you're doing some vector calculations with in your 3D game. You're like, I do need math. Actually, I never thought about it, but this would be very useful if I'd studied harder math. So I would say, as a game designer, it's important that you're kind of a sponge, and not just about game design, but about the world. You could draw inspiration from history, as I did, or the arts, or the world, the environment. There's all kinds of things to be inspired by, and especially other people. So I think as a game designer, it's important you have, not a mind that's so open that everything falls out, but be willing to take everything in and filter it through your experience, through your perception, what creates value for you. And if you do that, you're going to find a lot of people do that same thing, have that same sense of value for this thing. And then you can start to find your core audience, your core players, and deliver these same experiences to them. That's the way I think about it.
So, looking at kind of your resume, Thad, of the games you've worked on, we have Hardline, we have Rivals, we have COD, right? You seem to be locked into FPSs. Is that a choice? Did you realize that, hey, this is just what I'm good at and I'm going with it? Or
I,
yeah,
I
how do you?
Greg, I've been fascinated by shooters ever since I played the original Doom. The first time I saw the original Doom running on a PC, I'd never seen anything like it. It was at a friend's house. It was at a party, and somebody's nerding out in the corner, and it was the host's brother. He was a younger brother, and I was like, I just spent the rest of the party playing that game with him, and that's the first time I was ever exposed to shooters. And from there, I went in and I got a Voodoo card, and I got Duke Nukem, and I became a master of Quake on the 1200 baud modem. Oh my God, those were the days. You had to run through an external network. Oh, it was crazy. It was way back in the early days of gaming, and I just got absolutely hooked by the competitive aspect and then how friendly the players were. There's a real sense of community back in the day when you played a shooter. People were like, oh, that was a really good game. You did really well. And you'd be like, I can't believe you sat in that corner and got me. Good job, or whatever. And I think early on there was a spirit of fun and adventure. Yeah, sure, there's some toxicity here and there. Maybe sometimes that was part of it too. You can remember the early, competitive culture, but in general, people were just excited to be experimenting with this new thing and having fun with it. And this is when I started to do things like I was studying for a technical degree about Microsoft networking. And in my spare time in between the labs, I would edit levels. I learned one of the very early called Virtus Death Matchmaker. It was an old piece of software, and I learned how to make levels, and that started my technical journey on the side of game development.
Amazing. All right. Let's kick into the meat of today's discussion. And we're going to break this up into a few topics for our listeners. We're going to talk about building for
Yeah.
scale. We're going to talk about innovation versus expectation.
Hmm.
We're going to talk about team and leadership, player perception, and the next chapter.
So all
Will we
like.
hit all those? I don't know. But let's try it out. So let's start with building for scale.
Yeah.
We're in this world where you have games that are getting bigger, you have forever games, you have more players playing games, and I think the definition of a gamer has changed. From someone that's worked on some of the biggest first person shooters and games, period, out there, What's the biggest lesson you learned about building something for something that's going to take over 100 million players?
Oh. So I'm going to give away some of my secret sauce here, actually, with this. So
That's what we're here
I,
for.
I, I think that when you look at these franchises, it's tempting to think they've always been that way. They've always been this giant, colossal franchise with all this momentum, all this power, all this financial weight. And the truth is, they all started off unknown, right? Go look at the beginning of Battlefield. 1942 came out. It was great. It was a new experience. Man, I got so addicted to that game. And what did it sell? Like 2.5 million, I think. And then every version of that game from then on sold about double. And so when I think about scaling and creating for scale, I think that when you look at something like a Call of Duty, it's 3 or 4 games in one: single player, multiplayer, zombies, Warzone. There's like so many different offerings in there. It creates immense value for the players. And that's something that's really hard to approach as somebody who's got a new product that doesn't have these layers of depth. That's let alone the 20 years of experience of all the user feedback, of all the individual tweaks and tunings, of all the really, really smart people putting in hard work to make this thing performant and scalable and robust and secure. And you can't neglect any of that. That's all super important. So, kind of thinking that you're going to rally a 300-person team that's never done this before, put them together, throw millions and millions and millions of dollars at them, and be like, we're going to kill Call of Duty, seems to me to be a bit of a fool's errand. That seems to be the wrong way to approach it. The way I would approach it is I would build a franchise anew, much like the franchises of history have been built. Start off with knowing who you're targeting, build that core offering, test and learn, iterate through it, work with the audience, find the fun, and keep chasing that and be true to your vision and true to your product and true to your audience. And I think that we've seen those strategies succeed many times.
It's when you break down Call of Duty like that, it's fascinating. Zombies is the one that kind of stands out of my mind because at first it came every few years and people got excited by it. But I think there's a learning lesson that you're taking there, right? You're trying to determine, hey, what do players like about zombies? We don't want to keep tacking it on year after year. We want to make sure we build something that will continue to get people excited because if you put it year after year, people will start to get sick of it, right? People do eventually kind of get burnt out of
100%.
something like that. So it's interesting how you break it down into, I mean, clearly it is four different categories, but how do you nurture each one of those and grow each one of those?
And then what's really interesting is that players too, as you kind of hinted at, change over their experience with a game, right? I may start off as a single player guy, and then after a while, I'm like, okay, I've played a lot of single player. I kind of get it. They're kind of similar. Maybe I should try multiplayer. And now because I've played single player, I already know how to aim and shoot, throw grenades and climb and do all this stuff. Maybe it's a little bit less intimidating at this point. And so maybe over the course of my lifetime as a player, I start to change, right? I think we all change as we get older. It's kind of an obvious sentiment in a way, but it also applies to how you game, and you may find yourself enjoying different things than you did when you were younger. I think it's pretty natural.
It's funny as you're talking. I'm thinking about your progression, right? Call of Duty, you built the DLC where you're flying a bomber. It's probably pretty much on rails. Hardline becomes more so off rails, but you're also juggling this. Hey, we're taking the Battlefield universe into the streets of LA or wherever it was, right? And then you had Rivals, which was kind of just a big open world there. And I guess is there a how do you continue to grow and expand that kind of knowledge for yourself? And the question doesn't really make sense like
No,
that.
it
But like,
does.
how do you?
This is something
Yeah,
Greg. It's something that I've shaped my career around. Honestly, it's why I've worked for so many of the major publishers. I've worked for Activision, EA, Amazon, Ubisoft. A bunch of the top players, and this was intentional. I want to know how they work. I want to know how they think. I want to know how they differ between the different studios. And I've learned a lot between all these different studios. And my goal is always to try to figure out how to help gaming get better. I think if you're not learning, if you're not growing, if you're not taking risks, if you're not innovating, you're not doing it right. And I like taking smart, calculated risks. I like taking risks that you get indicators. These risks are the right risks to take. These are the right bets to place. Now, of course, not every risk is going to pan off, but being able to identify that earlier, this is unlikely to work versus this one's likely to work, allows you to focus your vision, allows you to find the right things to create that experience for the audience. Does that get at your question?
yeah. So two questions here in one. It's a special 2 for 1 sale. What is the most underrated design that keeps a competitive shooter alive for that long? And then what is the biggest unseen factor that can kill a game?
Oh, those are two very interesting, very different questions. So let's talk about underrated features that sustain. I think a lot of games underplay how important community is, how important it is to be able to have a positive experience in the game where you feel supported, where you feel that relatedness with the other players in there. These motivations for social connections are an intrinsic motivator for humans. It's one of the reasons we do anything is we seek out these connections, right? Along with mastery and the ability to make choices, autonomy. This relatedness, the ability to feel connected to other people, to help other people, to be helped by other people, is a core intrinsic motivator for humans. And I think a lot of times this is a little bit underplayed, especially in some competitive shooters where they have the basics in there. You can match make and find friends and so on. But I think games at this point should be cognizant of how important this is, and they should be embracing communities in games. Now, some games do a brilliant job of this, right? But I think shooters in particular could do a better job of creating communities, embracing them, and allowing players to find their own play styles. And then helping players find those play styles so they can experiment with them. So they think, this is how I like to play. This is how I like to play. I'll give you an extreme example. On the one hand, you've got the grognards, the people who like milsim, who are hardcore, want to do after action reports and all that. I've done that. I have to admit, I love that stuff too. But then on the other end are the arcade players who want to jump in and get a 15-minute session after work and relax, right? So those are two diametrically opposed experiences, but they can both exist in the same kind of game. And I think it's important if you have that kind of experience to not fragment your audience and make them choose, but let them find how they want to play and how they can find other players that want to play that way.
I love that answer, and I will tell you why. I was talking with someone yesterday. It was just on LinkedIn, and we were talking. He put a post that Rivals has lost 80% of its player
But
base, and yeah, and I said, at the end of the day, if you look at these forever games, they have a community aspect in it, right? Fortnite, before the bus leaves, you can all hang out. Roblox, Minecraft have just open worlds you can play in it. And I was playing Fortnite with my son the other day, and I make him play on the Switch. He wants to play on the Xbox. That's where I play though. So he hates it because by the time the Switch loads, he misses that time before the bus leaves, and he loves to be able to run around and dance. And I was just like, they're doing it right. Like, they just need a mode where it's an open community like this. Rivals is going to be fine, but it's always going to have a lower base number because you just have the hardcore team based FPS. Like, there's no community aspect to it. Whereas you see these other games that live on forever, is they just embrace community. They make it fun for people. It isn't just shooters, it's also this other aspect of it as well. And I think it's often overlooked. People want to break down, oh well, what's the value, blah blah blah. Like, no, stop thinking so much about it. It's just about fun, right? Like, that's all it is. You can't measure that, and I think it's those intangibles that people don't think about.
I love that. You can't measure it, but yet at the same time, you can tell if it's present or not.
Yes.
And I don't want to say it's digital like that because it's not going to be universally present for everybody. But like how much more fun? That's always a tricky question for a designer because what does fun mean exactly? And there's all kinds of different philosophies and approaches to how to measure fun or how to think about fun. But I love
Right, if they
that.
reopen the game, that's the perfect indicator. Hey,
Did they
they
come
came back,
back? It
right?
was fun, yeah. Or
Exactly,
or they're
right? Like,
addicted. I don't know which one, but one of the two.
that. Right. What about kind of the killer factor? What kills a game?
I think that's a really fascinating question. I'm not going to pretend like I know all the answers here, but I think one of the important factors is that you need to have identified who's going to play this game, and then that audience has to be big enough to sustain your investment and your risk you're taking. And I think there have been a couple of notable games. We won't mention any of them, but there have been a couple of notable games that didn't have a clearly identified target audience. And when the game came out, people were like, "Is this for me? I don't think it is. It's not. What's happening here?" And this caused some shooters some kind of catastrophic failures in a way. Part of identifying that key audience too is making sure that you've got a hook, something unique, something of unique value that brings the players in. What's the innovation here? Why is this different than what I already have? What's going to break me away from what I'm currently playing? And this ties into an aspect I like to call, ironically, friendship hostage. Imagine all my friends are playing a certain online multiplayer game. I'm going to go play that with them. Even if I don't particularly like that game, I like my friends. So I'm going to go play with them, right? And it's going to cost more to now move me out of that social situation to try something else. I'm going to need to be motivated. How am I going to be motivated? Oh, that sounds cool. Do you guys want to check this out? Oh, that does sound cool. Let's go. So I think having identified your audience, getting that message to them with your brand and your all of the kinds of things you're promising to the player, the value you're promising, that's really really important that you identify those people and get them the message.
That that the hostage,
Friendship hostage. I know it's a
friendship
terrible
hostage.
term. I'm sorry
I
about
love it though. I'm
that.
going through it right
Yeah.
now. Like I have Battlefield 6
Yeah.
and I'm trying to convince my 3 friends that I play with, yo, just download this game. It's so much more fun as a squad. They're like, "No, we're just going to keep playing Fortnite. We're having fun with it." Like we've been playing that for a year, guys. Like one of my friends gets it for free cuz I bought it, so he has it. He just doesn't want to install it. Like, dude, like, come on, man. There's new cool things coming out. Maybe we'll hate the game and that's fine, but like if you don't try these new experiences, you're doing a big disfavor to the people in the industry that spent time to build this as well, right? Like it's a huge game. And if you can't take your eyes off of Fortnite, there's other games that are going to suffer because of that.
I'm not ever one to criticize people for what they like to play. I think everybody has kind of their different perspective, their different fun, and if that's your jam, and you're like, I don't need anything else. I'm like, more power to you. That's so cool. You found something. I grew up on certain games, and I spent all my time in them too. So I totally get that aspect. I might be reluctant to go try out this new thing. Okay, I wasn't because I'm a kind of a explorer and inventor and so on. But a lot of people would be, and I can understand that. So I empathize with that, and I also agree with your point. It'd be nice um, if more developers could get more mind share from various games, but that's kind of on the developers. They have to offer a big enough value proposition to switch these people out of these forever games. And I think indie games are doing a great job of this right now. They're offering unique new experiences quickly that the audiences can come in and help contribute to and form those communities and really collaborate on and help invigorate. And I think that's a really interesting path forward.
It's also a different angle is consumers need to realize if I'm not paying $60 or $70 upfront for a game, I'm buying all these skins that I'm not factoring into this, and I'm still putting money into this game as well anyway, right? So while it is a free game, has it been free to you? And that's not a battle I'm going to win anyway. They
But
want to run around as Beavis and Butthead. They want to run around as Beavis and Butthead.
I mean, and again, it kind of depends on who your audience is, right? Is that the thing your audience wants? Well, then it makes sense to do that. Is that not the thing your audience wants? Well, it doesn't make sense. And it gets really tricky with a really big game because you don't have one audience. It's not a monolithic thing where everybody wants the same thing. Are you kidding me? No, not even close. So this is where it's important to stay true to your vision, to understand what it is you're creating and who you started off creating it for, and to stay true to that. Because if you start trying to become everything to everybody, you really start to lose. That's when your game or your franchise starts to go in decline, in my opinion.
And I want to tackle that next. But before we get into this, let's talk about back in the day when you had this thing you called a newspaper
Yeah.
and you were looking for your jobs and you found that QA job. What were the games you were playing at that time? Like what were the games that got you so like hooked onto that gaming
Tribes.
industry that you said, I need to be
I
on
was
this?
hooked on Tribes. I don't know if you know what Tribes is. It's kind of a game from
Yes.
history, but it was a,
Yeah.
a game where you had two bases. You had soldiers with different classes. You had vehicles. It was like an early Battlefield, but sci-fi, right? And
Hmm.
it had jetpacks. And it had the most amazing bug that turned into emergent gameplay I know the story of. In this game, you could press the space bar and you would jump a little bit, right? Pretty common. Now, this game also had big mountains and big valleys. And what happens is if you press the space bar, you remove your friction. So as you went down a hill, you would jump the whole way, pressing your space bar, and you would ski and you would gain velocity, and then you would hit the other side and you go up and tap, 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 and you'd sail up into the sky. And it felt so good and so powerful. And the game became this almost like physics ballet. The main weapon was called a spin fuser. It's a slow moving rocket. And so people started to get good at being like, you ran out of jet juice. I know your arc. Bam, I'm going to shoot where you're going to be. And so these things called mid airs became like the pinnacle of skill in this game. And this game was just so much fun to discover as a new gamer. I'd never seen anything quite like this. I'd been playing the superheroes mod on Quake before, so I'd experienced flying in rockets. It wasn't as expansive and cool as this. This had really thought about the physics. And so that was the game I was playing. And it's one of the things I showed off my mod for this to the Gray Matter folks. It's one of the things that helped me get my first job. So I just got super invested in this. Now, I tend to get invested in anything I obsess over. I got invested in Civilization before this and made mods and so on. So it's kind of in my DNA to tinker and take things apart. Even electronics, I've done that my whole life. So I'm just kind of a tinkerer and a taker aparter, I guess. But in this case, it really lined up and helped me.
Did you Tribes just like got re-released or Tribes 4 came out? I don't know what it was.
Tribes
Did you give that
Ascend
a
and
shot?
Tribes. There were a bunch of different attempts, yes.
I heard it didn't quite hit the market as much as the other ones did.
I think there is a certain time in gaming history when things work best, right? I think that, and there may be cycles where they come back around, but 2D platformers weren't always the height of popularity, and so I think there's always kinds of a kind of a give and take to the popularity or the ability for any given game to occupy a large chunk of mind share in the current demographic. And when I talk about knowing your market, knowing your audience, this is what I'm talking about. Understanding where people are currently at, not where they were at 10 years ago, 20 years ago. They might have come back. You might be right. You might be onto something by doing this retro game. Holy cow, there've been some great retro game System Shock. Anybody? But at the same time, like, what can you do that's new that moves it forward might be more interesting than revisiting something players have already experienced for dozens of hours. And that core fan base has dwindled, and now the new players aren't looking for that kind of experience.
That's so well said. The amount of people I talk to that want to go back to play GoldenEye, and I'm thinking to myself, GoldenEye is going to be a lot clunkier and ugly than you remember. And people didn't love Perfect Dark at the time. Perfect Dark innovated on GoldenEye in such a great way. I think they had the better aiming stuff built into it, and they implemented bots. And it was funny to see Rare take that step from GoldenEye to Perfect Dark. Obviously, the new Perfect Dark didn't work out, but
Oh,
I agree with you. You have this time in history, everything worked. You were playing Tribes, I was playing Unreal Tournament,
I
and
played that too.
it's
Okay.
funny. The first thing I think about is the physics, man. They had the one of the guns that like could bounce off the walls, and the like you can see all that stuff. And physics makes such a big difference in the game when you
That's
see it and you can play it. It just feels great.
that's something I tend to put in my bio is I'm fascinated by physics. Flying, driving, shooting, throwing, running, biking, swimming, boating, whatever it might be. There's a really interesting interaction in my brain between the world and how these things go together. And solving for physics problems is, I think, one of the very early things humans start to do. How do we build a building, right? How do we make sure something stands up when the wind blows? How do we keep the rain out? And so for me, it's kind of a foundational aspect of how I think about things. And when I see games that do this really well, I get excited because I'm like, here's a deep, complicated system that I know kind of how it works, and I want to go push on it and see how if it works how I expect it to. I love experimenting. I love finding things other players haven't found. If you can think of some other emergent gameplay. We talked about skiing. You remember back in the day when you used to be able to C4 the Jeeps with friendly fire off on Battlefield 1942, and if you got it just right, you could actually land them on the capture point with your friends in them. So like things like that are just so much fun for me to play around with and have fun with. You used to be able to stand on the wings of the B-17 as it flew, and it would roll and dump you all off for the capture point. I mean, stuff like that. It's goofy, right? And you can decide if that fits the vision of your game, but it's also really fun. And playing with physics in that way is just fascinating to me.
It's funny, completely unrelated, but one of my most memorable Nintendo 64 moments was playing Wave Race 64. And
Okay.
sometimes you'd start Wave Race and it was like a stormy day in the game and the waves were just huge and you're just like, wow, like this, I'm taking this jet ski up this wave and it was just, it felt so good. And since then, to your point, traversal in game has become such a cool thing on how do you travel. I didn't get to play the new Spider-Man, but I heard the quick travel is just so well done, and I'm just like, the better and quicker we can get around maps, the cooler ways we can do it. That's technology advancing because you can move quicker. You don't have to wait for those load screens that take some time to go there, and I think it's just super cool.
We can hide them better now, at least.
All right. So the second part of this, innovation versus expectation.
Mm.
It's one of these things I always find interesting, and clearly Call of Duty is not out yet, but this is one of those Call of Duties where they have running on the wall, and that always gets the people angry or excited. And you have this balance of innovation with the risk of alienating a massive player base. How do you think you would tackle kind of an innovative change, or how do you balance that innovation to not alienate your player base?
Yeah, this is a really tricky challenge, right? And I think a lot of it again comes down to understanding what the core promise of the game is. And this is going to be different to different players too, and this is where it gets really tricky, right? But what is the largest segment of your player base going to be the happiest with? This is probably going to be the core that you've designed it for, and if not, maybe you should be designing for that larger core. And if you're going to make them happy, that's the most important part, right? It's also important not to generate a negative narrative around how you message it or how you handle it and so on. But in general, if you're making decisions in alignment with the vision for your game, the audience understands this. Now, maybe sometimes they'll have quibbles about this, that, the other thing. They'll want this changed, they'll want this removed or tweaked or reduced or whatever it might be. That's great. That's great feedback. That's the kind of thing you need as you iterate through a game to make it awesome. But again, I think identifying those core values or the pillars of the vision and making sure that this appeals to them is important. So let's say that one of the pillars is tactical movement. And you go, wall running's not tactical. This is going to alienate people. Oh, that's not a good choice. Or maybe you go arcade and you go, oh, arcade, wall running is very arcade and very cool. We like this a lot. It fits this kind of vision. So I think, again, it comes back to kind of the direction of the game you're making and how the vision helps you inform these chases. Now, each one of these also you should be testing, right? You should be failing fast. You should absolutely be testing and learning. Take this new wall running prototype and go take it to your most experienced testers, get their opinion. That'll be one opinion. Take it to developers. That'll be another opinion. Take it to some of the players. That'll be 100 new opinions, right? And see if there's a consistent message in this. Oh, I like it because of this. Oh, I don't like it because it doesn't do that. Or this part's really cool, but I don't like it even though it does that. That's maybe some of the most useful signal. So I think you start looking at the data and you're not data driven. You're not using the data to make the decision. You're informed by it. It's giving you a better context of how this fits your vision and how it fits the product and how it suits the audience or not. And that's tricky and that requires experience. And it also requires the other thing I talked about, which is iteration, right? This is one of the big keys to making anything awesome. First time you make anything, it kind of sucks almost always. I've had one case in my life where the first time I made something, it shipped that way. Every other time, it has to go through multiple turns on the lathe, right? You're going to cut pieces off. There's a famous quote variously attributed to different sculptors and artists, but attributed to Michelangelo. It says, hey, somebody asked him, how do you carve an elephant out of a block of marble? He says, well, I start with a block of marble. And I just carve away anything that doesn't look like the elephant. And by iterating over time, this is kind of what you're doing. You're trying to find that core shape of the vision that suits the audience underneath this big block of here are all the possibilities.
Do you find that sometimes player feedback shapes a vision too
All
much,
the
or
time.
is there no such
I
thing?
think one of the tendencies is to listen to the loudest, angriest voices in the room. And the thing you've got to remember is that the happiest players aren't saying anything because they're busy playing your game. So it's important not to over-index on the negative narratives or the anger. I think everybody's going to have opinions, and not everything can be for everybody. There are very often diametrically opposed choices, milsim versus arcade. Those two audiences can't really play the same game and have the same time. It's not the same experience. And you probably shouldn't try. You should probably have different experiences and figure out which one you're creating for who. And then give them some clear markers so they can go in with those expectations. You have that kind of player contract. Here's your unique value. Come on in.
I first met Thad at Gamescom 2 years ago, and he kind of broke down this qualitative and quantitative feedback to me. And it's words I heard before, but I didn't really put into kind of process them. And since then, even what you're talking about now, it all lumps into that bucket, right? Yes, to your point, the loudest voices aren't always the right voices, they're just the loudest. Probably the people that are enjoying your game the most are sitting there playing your game. But it's important to say, hey, this guy came and just told me my game sucks, it's not Fortnite. Well, I'm not designing my game to be Fortnite, right? Like that's I don't care. Like, thank you for that feedback. That's great feedback.
Or maybe I care, but I go, that doesn't fit the vision, and it's not something we're going to do, right? I don't want to say I don't
You're no
care.
fitting me.
I appreciate the feedback, even if I'm not going to react on the feedback. I still want to hear it. I still want to hear
No, I
your
know.
opinion's still valid. You know what I mean? And as a game designer, this is important that the audience understands it. I don't ever want to be like, oh man, your opinion's dumb. Maybe my opinion's dumb. Like, I'm just because I'm a game developer doesn't mean I get to judge your opinion like that. I would say I'd use my judgment on does this fit the vision, right? Now,
Mhm.
this is interesting because let's talk about the difference between taste and judgment, right? My taste is I like
Mhm.
this thing because I like it. My judgment is you're going to like this thing because it fits the vision, it fits these pillars, and you like these pillars, and therefore I can deduce that you will like this thing, right? And so it's more important that I use my judgment than my taste. And for me to react and say, no, 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 your opinion's dumb, I don't agree. That's more my taste. That's my emotional reaction as opposed to my logical, like, oh, it doesn't fit the vision. That's good feedback, and maybe we need to fix our messaging around what this game is because you didn't know that. You know what I mean? So I would look at it more that way, and not to chastise you or anything,
No, no, no.
Greg.
Trust me. I try to be a nice person on the outside. Um, but, but but what I love that you said there is, I was a video game judge in it's a GDWC, the Game Development World Championships, a couple of years in a row, and you're forced to play games in genres that I don't play, and it's not me gonna be like, I hate this game. It's this is a really well polished game. It's not my style and it's not my thing, but I can feel how fluid this feels, or this mechanic feels really good. And I bet you that's even more powerful to the people who are creating that game because, hey, I'm not a fan of your game, but I love this mechanic and I want to keep playing this mechanic. Then they can say, hey, he found the fun in this mechanic and we want to build upon that.
That's a very powerful signal. I agree. If you can, cross all the other things you don't like to find something you do like in that, that is a great sign. That means that some of your features are crossing over. And ideally you would have more of this, and then you would have ways to configure the game, and all of this gets more risky because it takes more time, it takes more money, and then you have to find a larger audience, right? So I think one of the things that the game industry is thinking about right now is how do we get our validation faster and earlier and cheaper? How do we make sure that we're making the right thing for the players, right? How do we make sure this innovation is going to be sticky, that players are going to love it? And that's something I'm thinking about a lot these days.
And that's a perfect segue to section three, team and leadership, right? How do you, in this industry where we are moving quick and there's a lot of turmoil in the industry and everything's happening, how do you structure a team when you want to look at a team and decide, hey, this is how I want to structure my team and this is how we're going to iterate to keep up with the market?
Well, that's a really deep question. Um, Let me talk a little bit about how I've learned to lead over the years. And this is based on studying in school, having practical experience, talking to other great leaders, reading books, and so on, just over the 20 years I've been working in game devs, and probably the 10 years I've been a leader. So, one of the things I like to do is I like to design a framework for the entire experience. I want to know all of the questions that we need to answer. I don't necessarily have the best answers, but I have a stab at an answer. And I have an 80%, 70% answer. Something that's good, something you could ship, but it's not great. It's not awesome. It's not super all exciting or like super detailed or deep. And that's because I'm spreading myself pretty thin, creating this whole framework, right? But the second reason is I don't want to create everything to be super awesome. I want other people to come and take this vision, take this idea, take this goal, make it theirs. Because when they make it theirs, when the power of a team comes together and each person owns the vision in their own head and they're combining them in a new unique way, man, this is when you get magic. Let's talk about Tony Gialdini coming up with the idea for those reload animations in Battlefield Hardline. You remember where you took the RPG and you like stuffed it backwards, you did the TK thing with the dead space, and the third hand comes in with a magazine. Like, this is Tony's kind of brainchild. He came up with this thing. He was like, oh, I really want to do this. And I saw this and I went, oh my, this is brilliant. Why haven't we done more of this? How are we going to measure it? How often is it going to happen? I want to make sure it's something players can find and explore and celebrate. And or the JF Chabot did the drivable couch, right? Inspired by one of his other teammates who went on BattleBots and had a commercial segue where he's driving on a motorized couch. So like, there's so much of their personal individual vision and experience that pours in this game. This is what creates the magic in a game. And I want to create teams that can create this magic where I can say, we're going that way. And they go, is this good? And I go, what did the players say? What did your teammates say? They said, it's awesome. Hell yeah, it's good. you know, and we're going the same direction. We're making the same thing. That's what gets me pumped and energizes me to come in and help work with these amazing people who have come together to make sweet things for the players.
Yeah, but my one first of all, that's great, but you have to have trust in these people, right? Because at the end of the day, you have to have a
Yeah.
vision, right? And your vision has got to be, hey, stay between X and Z, right? And build away, right? But like, uh, my rebuttal would be like, you got to at least keep them in line,
Oh,
right? To a degree.
building a team is incredibly hard, and that's separate from what I was talking about. I was talking more about the framework for the vision of the project, right?
Sorry,
No, that's my fault. I think I kind of went off on the side there. Um, I think what you're talking about when you're talking about building a team, this is something I found to be true over the years, but the best predictor of future performance is past performance, or future behavior is past behavior, right? So if you've worked with somebody before and they are awesome, it's highly likely you're going to work awesome together again. So, and that's it's a little frustrating because you want to give everybody who's new a chance, right? But to your point, it's risky sometimes. Are they going to be able to work in a professional environment? That's the very basic one, right? Are they a senior enough designer they can kill their darlings, to let go of their ideas just because they're theirs? Designer's job isn't to have the best idea, it's to recognize the best idea. And so you need to understand them at a very deep level to make sure that they can work, and then they have to actually socially integrate with the team as well. This magic doesn't happen when people are isolated, not talking, and it works when they collaborate, when they want to support each other, when this designer is struggling with this thing and the engineer wants to stay late because they thought of a tool that could help them, or the other designer created a spline tool to place objects and to measure distances because the people were in the map were struggling. The people who go out of their way to help the other people, the synergy is what you need. And that can be something I haven't found a reliable way to screen for this in an hour long interview. If you know of one, I would love to hear it. And maybe there are some hiring experts out there that could tell us this kind of thing. But my experience is it can be difficult to tell. There's interviewing skills, and then there's on the job, and they're slightly different in some ways. You can train to be an interview skilled at interviews, and you can train to be skilled at on the job. But being skilled at one doesn't necessarily translate to being skilled at the other. I've seen people who are great at their jobs who are terrible at interviewing, vice versa. So
Yeah, it's the difference between book smart and street smart, right? And I think the same thing goes in the workplace. I could be a great interviewer, I could be a great salesman, and you don't even know that. But when push comes to shove, it's got to be experience, and you got to see how experience works. And that's again, I remember being younger, always wanting high level titles, and they're like, "No, you don't have the experience for it." I'm like, "No, that's bullshit, man. I'm smart enough. I know this stuff." And then you start seeing the shit people have to go through. Like, oh, like you just learn that from being on the job, and you learn that by going through it. There's no really easy way to do it
no
other than
substitute.
I've worked with this person for 5 years. I know what he's capable of, and I don't know what he's capable.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There are a couple proxies. If you've worked with somebody else really closely for a long time and they've worked with that person for a long time, that's a pretty good proxy too.
sure.
But I don't do back channel references or any of that kind of stuff. It's just another factor to go. This person could fit well into your team, could mesh well into your team. Let's ask them some questions about culture and so on, and you may have some more insight because of that.
How would you? To me personally, one of the hardest things is delegation. I think, especially when you're building something of your own, you kind of sit here thinking, "Well, I know what I want it to be, and I know what I want it to be." And to your point, you said, "You know what? You need to let other people make it their own as well. That's what makes it special." But with that being said, how would you rate your delegation skills?
It's a challenge, right? As a designer and as a leader, I always want things to go perfect. I am a little bit obsessive compulsive, secret here, and I'm a bit of a perfectionist. It's how I am. And so I'll tend to really noodle on the details and to pay attention to a lot of them. It's one of the things that makes me a good game designer. But now I've lost my train of thought, Greg. Can you refresh me on the question?
It was, how is your delegation
Oh,
skills?
well, see, I couldn't even delegate to myself there
Yeah,
to answer the question. Um, in
truth from
terms of
Greg.
delegation, I think that a lot of times I want to get in there, I want to fix it myself because I think, oh, I can just do it and it's easier. And that's a trap because I do that and it is easier and it goes great. And the person doesn't learn anything. They didn't learn how to solve it themselves. They learned that I didn't trust them to solve it. And now they're not going to try next time. They're going to bring me the problem. And if I do this to 10 people, guess what? I'm now doing 10 people's jobs. I very quickly learned how to delegate because of that. You cannot do everything or else you burn yourself out very quickly. So, understanding what's important to delegate is where the skill really starts to become relevant, I think. Understanding that these people are more than capable of handling this. This part is the part that only I know. Or this part is the most important thing that I need to focus my time on. I'm going to let the rest go and other people will have to take care of them. I'll delegate those tasks. So it's tricky and it requires a conscious effort of thinking about it. Um, and it definitely, changes perspective when you're working on small teams versus large teams. On a small team, there may not be enough people to delegate to. You may have to wear multiple hats. And then you're trying to figure out, wait, somebody else could do this. Either one of us could do this. What's the best use of each of our times? Then you'll have to go have a conversation about this. And hopefully you've got a production staff that can, or a person that can help you, assess this and talk about this and so on. I love producers who really understand where the team is at, where the project is at, where the tasks are at, and the status of things. So you can start to figure out. I was talking about this morning with somebody where that red line is at. The red line is you're not getting any features underneath this, right? And by effective delegation, you can help increase the number of features that go above that red line. And that's kind of your goal is you want to provide more game, more fun to the players as much as you can. It's your job as a leader to do this.
So you said two things. I want to write them down because I'm gonna forget because I don't remember things.
All good.
But the first thing that you said that I really loved was that if you just end up solving someone's problem for them or fixing their mistake, you're going to create a tremendous amount of work for yourself. To your point, it's a very dangerous snowball going down the hill where it's just going to pile up more and more. I think your employees, your coworkers will enjoy working with you more if you help enable them to understand where they went wrong, how they can get back on the right track, what can be different rather than just doing it for them. That shows trust, that shows career development, which I love. And I think that that's the most important thing that people can learn is don't just do it for people because you're going to screw yourself over by doing that.
There is, but I think there's also an element of empathy there that I rely on. I empathize a lot with other people. I've been through those experiences. I've had poor leaders, I've had good leaders, and I've learned from each of them. And I've remembered how miserable I was made. I would go home from one job and almost cry because I was so miserable working for that leader. And so once you've been through these experiences, you go, oh, how I react isn't just for the business, it has an impact on people's lives. And I care about that. As a leader, I care about that. I care about the people. I want them to do well. So, I think it's also important to think about not just this prevents me from getting overwhelmed, but to your point, this enables them and this lets them grow. Now, if this person goes and fails to solve the problem, okay, what did you learn from it? How do we make sure the next time you go solve this kind of problem, you don't fail the same way? That's awesome. Now, if they're failing the same way over and over, you're doing a crap job as a leader, right? You need to be helping them grow. And as these people grow, you're going to work with them 5, 10 years. They're going to grow into positions that may exceed yours. They may go to another company and have an amazing, much higher level job on a new game that you would want to work on. And I think that all of us kind of empowering each other, supporting each other is the right way to move kind of game development forward in the West. I think we have a very powerful game development community. And I think a lot of times it's under leveraged by the developers inside it. A lot of times we kind of think of it as cutthroat and competitive, but I don't think it needs to be that way. I think that we can lift each other up.
You brought up a good point about game development in the West. I think it's a touchy subject right now. I think other areas of the world are doing very good at catching up, if not surpassing, where we are at in game development. And I think that's just a kind of causal of outsourcing for all these years to cheaper areas of the world. People learn then, right? And with the power of the internet, anyone can is on the same level now. Is how does the West, how does the US kind of refind its footing? And I don't even know if that's the right word, but how do we get back to where we were, if it's even possible at
Well,
this point?
let me tell you a little bit about my love of America. The America I know and love is a leader of innovation, of ingenuity, of breaking new frontiers, space, the West, whatever it might be. We're cowboys, we're explorers, we're adventurers, and that's the spirit that I embrace, and I think is truly American. I love this kind of entrepreneur, inventive, innovative approach to things, and that excites me. And I think the other thing is that Americans might have forgotten a little bit of grit, which is when everything sucks, when everything is bad, how do you keep going? How do you get up that next day and do it again with a good attitude, with the right mindset? How do you keep going even when it's painful? And I think, there are people that don't have a choice and their lives are far less comfortable than ours, and they grit through it anyway. And I think Americans, uh, I'm not saying Americans don't have grit. I'm just saying I think that game development could do a better job of being more perseverant in some ways. God, that sounds incisive. Let's just forget that whole fucking thing.
Well, no, I it's funny. I spoke to Mark Otero. He's the founder of Azure Games. He built Star Wars
Yeah.
Galaxy of Heroes, and he's said that as an American, we've become too soft. We're
Mm,
apologetic about things where we don't need to be
I don't want to say it
apologetic.
that way. Not everybody's, you can't lump every American into a bucket, but we could have a competitive advantage we're not taking advantage of, is the way I think about it.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. It's an interesting perspective. I think, I don't like this whole, was it 996 thing that's going around
That's not
right
what I mean
now.
by
It's a
grit.
lot of work, but like to your point, like we got to be knocked down and we got to get back up again. Like I think that's the learning experiences here, that we just got to keep pushing ourselves forward to innovate, to think about what's that next big change.
Yeah, to be clear, I do not think 996 is in any way
No.
sustainable. It burns people out, it makes their lives miserable, and I don't see the benefit long term for the company either. It doesn't make sense as a philosophy to me, as a leader, as a person who thinks about business, as a person who knows games. It doesn't make sense to me. Creative work gets greatly degraded by being tired or overworked. So I just don't understand how that would be sustainable long term. I also don't think it's a quality experience for the humans that I care about. I personally don't like working that much. It consumes my entire life. I lose my family time. I lose sleep. I get stressed out. I lose my health. I've seen people go to the hospital because they work that much. So I don't believe in that as what I mean by grit. What I mean by grit is exactly what you said. When you get kicked in the stomach, can you get back up the next day and be like, that hurt, but you know what? Next time I'm gonna guard my solar plexus. Like, how do you keep going? How do you keep going at it? How do you keep going? Even though you've taken a hit, even though you've taken a string of hits, maybe, as I know many people have in this current day and age. How do you find the motivation to keep going? How do you make yourself do it? And that's what I mean by grit, that perseverance, that ability to look past the temporal and to go, yeah, this is a setback, but you know what? It's just a setback. And I've encountered setbacks before, and I've come back before. I've gone through this over the course of my career. I've gone from creative director to lead designer on a feature to a design director to creative director. I've come up and down, and for me, it's not so much about where you are in a given moment, but it's more about that journey. What are you learning? What are you advancing? How are you creating new things for the players?
And I think that's the most important part is to be that sponge that can absorb everything that's happening around. You can learn from what's happening at your company, at other companies, at your competitors, and you can figure out how do I make that next step. So for you, Thad, what do you think that next chapter is? Well, what do you have going on?
Well, who knows what the next step is? It's a really tricky time in the market. I'll tell you, I have a pretty cool idea for a game. I've been talking about it on LinkedIn. I've got some volunteer army assembled to help me with. I've got a full prototype, and we're trying to polish it up into an experience. And I'd love to be able to show this off at some point to the players and talk about what I'm working on. The time's not right yet, but I think I would really like just to be able to create awesome, fun stuff for players that with people I like to work with. That's my real goal. I like working with awesome people. I love working on multiplayer, especially on a live title, because you can make changes and see the results immediately and get that instant feedback. That's amazing for a game designer. So that's really what the future holds for me. What is the exact shape of that? I don't know. We'll find out. But I have a lot of interesting options and I have a lot of interesting conversations going on. So we'll see what happens in the future. But I will tell you this: I'm not going to quit making games, even if nobody wants to pay me. I'm still going to make them. I just do it in
Well,
my spare time.
yeah, right. I mean, why not? And if you can, more power to you. But when you look at the current like lineup of games that we have in 2025, we have the new Battlefield, new Call of Duty, we have some Fortnite, we have right. Are there evolutions that you like that you've seen in these games? So some that you dislike, some that you would look at differently.
Well, I think when it comes to like and dislike, we're talking about taste, and I don't know how relevant that is to most people. I'll talk a little bit more about my judgment, and I think the shooter market is particularly crowded, right? Especially in terms of like the action, the fast-paced Twitch stuff, right? You've got Call of Duty, you've got Apex Legends, you've got Warzone, you've got Counter Strike 2, which I play every day. You've got all these great games that are smaller session times, shorter matches, much more about the physical mechanics and being relatively easy to get into and master and learn and you stick around because of the social community or whatever your motivations might be. Now, when I think about that, I think that's if you're going to make a shooter, it's going to be really hard to get into that space and get any sort of signal, right? There have been a couple notable games lately that have tried to do this, and it's tough unless you have an innovation that's really really good, that really changes the core experience. We can talk about two amazing innovations that have done this over the course of shooters. The first of which is the integration of RPG mechanics into shooters in Modern Warfare. Holy cow, that opened my mind, and I was like, this is brilliant. How come I didn't think of this? I kind of did, but I didn't think of it this way. And this is much better than what I thought of. And it changed the way shooters work. Now every shooter's got this kind of RPG style progression. 30 kills to unlock this thing. You're going to do this and get this weapon. You're going to go over here and do these challenges to get this XP to get this thing to get this weapon or the skin or whatever, right? So these progression mechanics kind of fundamentally changed how shooters work. And then along comes BR. And BR is just kind of a game mode on top of an existing shooter, right? And so a lot of games can kind of take this innovation and use it and leverage it, but this also changes how shooters work. So I think being able to find something that has that mass appeal, that resonates with players, that gets them excited, that takes something familiar and adds something they didn't know they wanted, that's what you want, right? So when you talk about things like wall running, well, we already know what that is. Is that an innovation? No, that's an improvement. And to go back to your point, like how do you think about the feature set and how do you kind of decide what goes in the game? Well, you got to think what are the table stakes for this game based on the vision, based on the competition, right? What are we improving in terms of that table stakes experience? And then what are our innovations? And this is really, really important to understand about your game and how you go about making it. And you need to make sure you're focusing on not only the innovations, but making sure those table stakes are quality.
I'm gonna cut this side out. That's kind of where I'm gonna wrap things up. Do you want to talk about Ghost Dog, or do you not want to bring that
Not
up
yet.
quite yet?
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm not.
No,
I'm not like announcing the studio. I don't want to make a big deal out of it, anything like
no,
that.
it's fine.
Yeah, this is more like I'm doing some cool stuff, and I don't know what's next because I need to protect my brand a little bit because if I have to look for a job next month, I need to be able
I
to do
get
it.
it.
Yeah.
Um, is there any? Should I offer up any help that you want, or should I ask you that? Like, what are you looking for? Are you looking for more
No.
help, or do you
Oh
need?
God, no, no. I can't. I'm still getting requests, and I've got 30 fucking people, dude. I can't handle anymore. I've got no more bandwidth.
Cool.
It's
Then I'm
insane.
going to kind of just wrap it up here,
Yeah.
unless there's anything else you want me to bring up.
Is there anything else you want me to talk about? Did I hit everything you wanted to talk about? Did I do it
I
good?
think
Do you want a war
so, and
story?
you did do it good.
You
Yes,
want a war
you're
story?
perfectly. We have a full story to tell.
All right.
Hopefully, we get millions of watchers. That's my plan for this year.
I love it. If we
Um,
do, that's terrifying, Greg. I hope we don't.
we want them all, man.
All right.
Money follows you.
Let's go. 2
Um,
million. That's our goal. We didn't hit 2 million. We
that
failed.
I always love to hear what you're working on, what you're doing, what you've built, and just your industry, the experience that you've had. When we saw each other at GDC last year, I met a bunch of your crew that you've worked with before, and they were all just so cool and so easy to talk to. We've talked to Jack a number of times on the podcast, and they're just lovers of game like you are. And I think no matter what you choose to do next, you're going to have that audience that follows you just because of your love of the game. So I can't thank you enough for again coming to share your wisdom and your knowledge with us at Player Driven here. And we'll always stalk you no matter what. So thank you for that. But before we do go, is there anything else you just want to talk about or share or shout out?
Um, Yeah, I want to make a quick shout out to all the amazing developers. It is a hard time in the game industry, and it's very uncertain. And the you've got the grit, you've got the passion, you've got the skills to execute. I think that the only thing stopping you is you have to make money to make a living, and that's kind of where we're at these days. And if you're lucky enough to be able to, oh God, this is shit. Just cut that whole bit.
I love it, man.
If
I
you're lucky
love it.
enough to have a job and to be making a living doing what you love, you are very, very fortunate. And maybe that can help power your grit and help you get through this time of uncertainty. I do believe that things will get better. There's always dramatic downturns in any industry, and these things happen periodically, almost cyclically. I was talking to somebody the other day about, and they were mentioning the transition from 2D to 3D and how it was traumatic for the artist. I vaguely remember that. That was right as I got my career started, and I remember that. And people had to go upskill and get new tools, and some people chose to, and some people didn't. And that's why I say always be learning, always be looking forward, always be thinking about what does the future hold, where is it going, and how do I be ready for it when it gets here, or how do I beat it there?
I love it. And I'd also just add on to that is learn from the past.
Oh my God,
We've
yes.
spoke to different people who've been in the industry for many years, and they all share their wisdom. And the future will be different. There's UEFN, there's Roblox, there's tools you're building games from within, and that's different than the past. But the history and the lessons you've learned translate to today, and you can always be building upon that. Just remember, there's always been a layer below you, so you can keep building on top of that.
I love that, Greg. I always say I got to stand on the shoulders of giants. The first game franchise I worked on was Call of Duty. Come on, you know, So you're right. You're absolutely right. And if you neglect those layers of knowledge, you're doing yourself and your players a disservice. So you're absolutely correct.
Awesome. Well, Thad, thank you again. We'll have LinkedIn URLs to everything that Thad, or we'll have URLs to everything that Thad has talking about. We'll have his LinkedIn there. Again, Thad, thank you for joining us today, and I wish you the best of luck with everything. And we'll keep a close eye on you.
Thank you, Greg. It's a real pleasure to speak to you as always, and thank you everybody who's listened. And I always love to talk to people about gaming. I know I tend to overcommit myself and get my inbox flooded, but if you do want to talk about gaming, feel free to shoot me a message, and if I can, I'll reply.
Thank you again, Thad.
Cheers.